Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome to day 96 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's reading and commentary covers the book of Judges, chapter 19 through 21. Now, I want to lead off by saying tomorrow is going to be another perfect time to invite a friend or colleague to come along and join us through our read through the scriptures. We will be starting the book of Ruth, and pretty much we'll be covering the entirety of the book of Ruth. There'll be just a few verses left there at the end that'll be picked up in 2 days' time. But I just wanted to throw that out there to you as a little housekeeping. Now, today's reading, I know, comes across very bizarre and strange, and I'm going to do my best to try to compact it rather than stretching it out. But I want you to hold tight, because there's actually a reason for this event being accounted for. And it's because this is a little bit of a political drama that's taking place. Not so clear in the reading, but when you understand the events of the time and what's unfolding, this is actually a political hit piece, but the Lord using this to reveal something. So, stick with me. So it starts out with this Levite priest, and a different one from the Levite that was serving Micah. This is a different one altogether. But again, we sort of have this renegade Levite. So his concubine, his second wife, if you will, we don't know if this was a second or third wife. Normally a concubine was either a slave wife or a second wife that was taken because the first wife was barren, or maybe just for sexual pleasure. Not an appropriate thing, and not an appropriate thing definitely for a Levite priest. But this was the action that he had done. So she runs away, and he goes in pursuit of her and finds her at her father's house. And seems like he has good relationships with his father-in-law. And his father-in-law seems to even want him to hang around and stay there. You know, almost like, why don't you just move in with me? His father-in-law continues to delay his departure. And this, I believe, is what unfolds into creating a problem. The father-in-law, as I say, is kept them there as the son-in-law gets ready to leave. He's like, well, why don't you just stay to the afternoon? And then when he gets ready to leave in the afternoon, oh, just go ahead and stay another night. And then it's like the next day, well, just stay again, and keeps doing this until finally they leave in the afternoon, but can't make it all the way back to the Levite's home. And as they approach in the area of the city of Jerusalem, his servant says, well, let's turn and stay in this city tonight. But at this point, Jerusalem was still in control of the Canaanites and had not been conquered yet. Even though they'd had ample opportunity, even had the city almost delivered into their hands at one point, they hadn't taken it yet. They hadn't taken possession. That's not going to happen until King David. It was a tragedy that this hadn't happened. But the Levite priest says, oh, I don't want to stay in a city of foreigners. We're going to continue on our journey. And they end up in the city under the control of Benjamin, the Benjamites. And staying in the center of the city, the center square, nobody invites them. Nobody says, oh, come to our house tonight. And though you might think that's kind of odd, even to this day in the Mideast, if no one was inviting you to come to their home, that would really be a very rude thing for the people there. And disgraceful for them to have not invited you to their home. So at the end of the day, we find this older man, doesn't give us his age, just says old man. He approaches them and says, oh, you can't stay here. You know, sort of like, oh, you can't camp out here. You need to go to somebody's home and he says, well, nobody's invited us. And the older man invites them to his house. But before he does, the Levite even points out, he's like, we have all of our provisions. In other words, we're not going to be a burden on anybody. But no one's invited us. So now in the older man's home, we kind of get the picture. They're partying, they're having a good time. But now we're about to have a repeat of the events of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, you might think, because this is such a word verbatim repeat, you might almost think, well, this is made up, because you can't have that precise of a recording of the events, that clear of a repeat. Let me tell you, I've seen that many times. In my years of ministry, I've seen events repeat almost down to just pure perfection of the repeat. Not that it was a good event, though. One of the early times that I saw this was in my first few years in Nigeria, while serving as a youth pastor there. This would have been probably in about 97, and I was dealing with a situation so terrible and horrific. I'd gone to an older missionary and his wife to ask their advice and their support as I was dealing with this situation that I had encountered. And I hadn't gotten more than even halfway through telling about what was taking place before the missionary began to pick up on the story. And at first I'm like thinking, oh, well, he knows. And then he's like, no, I've seen this before. And everything that he was saying was exactly what I had encountered. And the situation that I was having to minister through. And his wife even began to recount the story. But it was of an event that had happened some 30 to 40 years before. Sin or repeat, especially when it's not dealt with. Or demons will have an influence over that situation, which I believe was the case that I encountered in Nigeria. So don't be fooled as you see this repeating the events of Sodom and Gomorrah when basically the townsmen come and say, send out this young Levite that we might get to know him, that we might have sex with him. And the Levite and the owner of the home, they end up sending out the concubine. And the men of the city rape her. And all night long. And then that next morning, she has made her way back to the threshold of the door where she's lying. Now the Levite priest, when he comes out, it's almost like he's just, hey, get up, get on the donkey, we're leaving, we're going home. She doesn't move. And the Bible's not clear as to whether she's alive or dead. The best you can really figure is that she's alive at that point. And he takes her and puts her on his beast of burden and takes her back to his home. But it's the events upon his arrival that is very startling. He takes a knife and cuts his wife, the concubine, into 12 pieces and sends those pieces of her body throughout Israel. That is really startling. But then it's the response of the people. When they receive the body parts, it's like they say, we've never seen anything like this before. And you would think, well, they're speaking of the body. But it's more like they're speaking of the actions that the Benjamites had done. We've never seen anything like this. Hello, UPS package. Here's a body part and a little note to tell you what took place. But now all of the tribes of Israel unite together. A large, vast army. One that could have easily subdued all the other surrounding enemies. Could have easily have taken out the Philistines. Could have easily taken out the Ammonites. Could have easily taken out the Midianites. This is a formidable army. but all to go against a brother tribe. And they're going to break down. They're not going to send everybody at once. It's almost like they're having a little compassion, but at the same time remembering that the Benjamite tribe, they're really the special forces of Israel. They were like the elite fighting force. I've pointed this out in the past. It also points out that they take a number of left-handed men who are missile throwers, or they are the ones that each of them have their slingshots, right? Their slings. And they send out these left-handed slingsmen. And you'd say, well, why is it pointing out that they're left-handed? Because remember, the tribe of Benjamin meant son of my right hand. So this is sort of a little slight. This is kind of one of the beginnings of sort of this attack, if you will, politically, in a sense. The first two times they send men, they're not victorious, and this urges or pushes the Israelites to consult God, and this is really the first time that they've consulted God. This, upon their second approach to the Lord, they're going to now give burnt offerings. This is the only time in the entire book of Judges that we have the nation gathering to present a burnt offering to the Lord. Now, yes, Gideon, he put food out, but the angel of the Lord touched it with the staff and burnt offering. And yes, we have the account with Manoah, Samson's father, giving the offering. But this is an actual priestly, appropriately done burnt offering unto the Lord. And they're going to have victory over the tribe of Benjamin. But here is what's taking place. Keep in mind that these events are most likely being written by Samuel. And I believe that this is being written during the time of the transition from King Saul, who was a Benjamite, to King David. And I believe it's to really gain support for David, saying, hey people, remember what the tribe of Benjamin did? Remember what they were like? Remember the atrocity that they did to this concubine? I think that's a part of what's taking place. At the end of this, the tribe of Benjamin is going to be greatly reduced and almost wiped out completely. And when it ends up with a small group of men who don't have wives, it's going to end with the rest of the nation saying, what do? We've basically said, cursed is the man that's going to give a daughter to the Benjamites. And they say, well, when we hold our feast, let the daughters go out to dance in the field, and tell the tribe of Benjamin to go out and take for you wives among them. In other words, kidnap your wife. So we're going to have a good little party and a little wife kidnapping that's going to take place during that party. And that is how the tribe of Benjamin continued to exist. It's really a tragedy, this story. But the worst part of all is the way that it ends, the last verse of the book of Judges. And I want you to consider this, because this is so much of the way that we're going this day and age as a society, as people who even attend churches. It says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Such a tragedy that that's where the nation had come to. And we know that they're going to end up in the next few chapters that we read, they're going to demand a king. Really, again, rejecting God's kingship and God's leadership. Though we know that God would ultimately provide them with a king, they're going to demand that they have a king. It's so sad when people refuse to consult the Lord, and things never tend to go well when people leave God out of the picture. Brothers and sisters, I do hope that your day is going well. Don't forget to invite some people to join in with our chronological read. Until tomorrow, God bless.